welcome to another Digital Transformation Survivors podcast with me, Julian Tedstone. I'm your host, and we're here to talk about all of the trials and tribulations and strategies and successes and learnings of managing a web estate. So that's a portfolio of multiple websites, applications, serving different audiences, different brands, different locations. However it is you divide your business, we believe that's a special challenge, and we're here to talk about it today. So I'm really excited because today I've got a long time collaborator, let's say, in Mr. Alan Botwright, who is the director of product and solutions marketing for Acquia. And if you don't know Acquia, which you should, it's the enterprise open digital experience platform, or POSH CMS, which evolved from the open source Drupal stack. So Alan and I have been in shared meetings, many shared meetings over the years, trying to work out the best solutions for various organizations trying to address this challenge. So I'm very happy to welcome you here today. Alan, how are you doing?
Hi, Julian. Thanks for inviting me today. I'm happy to be here. As you mentioned, we've done quite a few sessions in the past with various customers and thought leadership pieces. So yeah, it's great to be involved in your new podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And well, what better way to start than to give a little bit of an overview, Alan? I mean, I've just given an overview there of Acquia. We used some terms there. We talked about digital experience platforms. We talked about CMSs. When we were in the lead up to this conversation, we were using phrases like SaaS and PaaS as well. So those are kind of in the mix. Give us an overview of the organization, your role within it. What kind of solution does it provide to people?
Well, I started Acquia just over 10 years ago now, so quite a long time ago. And before that, I run a little agency called Square, which was very specialized in Drupal application development. And it was kind of a natural progression for me to end up working at really the home of Drupal, as I like to think about Acquia. And I spent quite a bit of time involved in like a pre-sales role originally, which was like solution architecture team, we used to call it. That's evolved into different names over the years, but effectively just sitting down with customers, understanding what problems they've got, and trying to look at some solutions around that. But really, my trajectory started to branch out quite a lot into value creation, and it wasn't a trajectory that I initially planned to go on, but got really interested in building out the business case side of things and being able to really take those solution components and apply them to measurable business impact, really growth, cost, and risk from the perspective of, say, a C-level discussion. And then just really putting that wrapper around things. And it's a combination of those processes really, and that experience that led me into actually product marketing, which I'm in now. And my particular focus is really the overall multi-product solutions, which cover everything to do with the digital experience. So CMS is a strong component of that, of course, probably the primary component. But then it's looking at the technologies around that, managing the data, creating the adaptive experience, so we're moving away from the static site into the dynamic site. And really that's that my progression is in line with how the CMS capability has really evolved over time. So there's kind of parallels there.
And I think that one of the reasons that I'm really excited to talk with you today is that Drupal has evolved as a CMS that I guess has got a specific point of view on how you provide digital experiences to multiple audiences, different markets, different segments. And I guess it's one of the reasons that I started working with Drupal is because it's a great a really adaptable tool to help you do many different things to many different audiences. And it'd be great to get your thoughts on, well, I mean, first of all, give us a description of Drupal in the CMS space. How do you see it? Where, how does it differ from some of the other great solutions out there? So for those who don't know, I think the most recent Gartner had Drupal in the kind of the top right leaders quadrant, and specifically Acquia, and it's been there for quite a while alongside other CMS platforms like Adobe, for example. What makes it so special for addressing those types of challenges?
I think you touched on it, which was its adaptability. The vision behind it originally, going back to Dries's vision, was whether you have a very small site experience, you can work at that level, up to the largest enterprise, which is certainly the experience at Acquia. Is we're working with some of the largest companies in the world that have literally thousands of websites. And I think the evolution of Drupal was alongside empowering the developers as much as it was solving the particular problem of content management as well. Now, the demands around Drupal have changed over the years. I mean, we describe it as a CMS, but originally I thought about it as more of a content platform. It was it's half a development platform, half CMS. But there's certainly the trajectory in the latest release of this, which is now called Drupal CMS, which is really addressing the market demand, really, which to simplify the capabilities of Drupal. Let me go back one step, actually, important here, which is Drupal is extremely powerful and always has been, and it can do anything. But that power comes with a base level of expertise to be able to unlock that power. That's always been the strengths, but somewhat a bit of a weakness of Drupal as well. And the direction of travel for Drupal is really to sort of recognize that. And I would say to democratize Drupal's power to a larger audience. So that would be the average marketing user can access these capabilities and can extend capabilities beyond basic CMS capabilities, like something like WordPress would have, because a lot of that in the enterprise is about integrating into other data sources and other products, something that Drupal excels at. So it's really balancing that problem of the enterprise requirements with the simplicity of that anyone can pick it up and start building out an experience. So this is a constant balancing act to get that right. But I think just that democratization of that power is something that the Drupal projects aim to do, and certainly something Acquia has been key in driving that thought leadership and aligning the open source community around that specific goal.
And break down for me that kind of ecosystem, because there's an open source piece of code, there's an open source community, there's a community of developers, and then there's I guess an enterprise focused organization. Or is that fair? Is it enterprise? But there is an organization capable of supporting enterprises in Acquia. What are those kind of component parts, and how do they fit together?
Well, yeah, I mean, there is the open source project, which is which is now actually considered to be the Drupal core, and then on top of that, the latest version is called Drupal CMS, which is effectively a layer on top of that, which again is an open source project, but it's curated with this objective in mind that I was just describing. It's about that democratization of the capabilities. Now, it's primarily aimed at the non-technical user to be able to simplify access to those capabilities. I mean, as you mentioned, Acquia really started life it was 2007, and at that particular time, the Drupal project was probably 6-7 years old. Dries, the founder of the project, started it in his dorm room, and it was his kind of project, sort of pet project. And the speed in which the adoption of that in open source, because he was a big fan of the open source idea, was very, very quick, to the point where the adoption of the technology was so rapid that there was an opportunity to build an enterprise wrapper around that. And it's really going back to the original idea behind Acquia was to be what Linux is and Red Hat, the relationship between those, what Red Hat is to Linux, there was a managed layer on top of the open source technologies. And that's how Acquia started, really. It was an enterprise layer. So it seems sort of kind of crazy now that the idea of using open source for an enterprise, that was an incredibly toxic idea back in 2007. It was filled with.
Yeah, I remember it. We've come a long way, haven't we? I mean, it was a very challenging conversation to bring open source into the enterprise, wasn't it? You know, not that long ago, and there was a very stiff resistance, particularly from the CTO community, as I remember it.
Yeah, incredibly so. And it would almost be a conversation killer straight off. But I think that's where the opportunity existed was, well, how can we put what would be an enterprise SLA around what Drupal's offering and put Drupal on Rails to some extent? So you're taking the risk out of it and you're providing a layer on which an enterprise would be accepting of that from a security perspective. And in terms of bringing the best of that community to the forefront. So that's kind of where things started. Also, we're getting to the evolution of that, and really where content layers and have evolved. And we can take several trajectories how we might explore that on this call. But yeah, that's where it started. I mean, really, where we are now, we're considered to be, and you touched on this, for the last 5 years, we've been a leader in the Gartner MQ, and we're up there with companies like Adobe and Optimizely, and we've maintained that position. And I think it's testament to the power of the capabilities that are there. When it comes down to the complexity of the enterprise in particular, there needs to be this balance of power and flexibility, and a simple CMS solution out the box isn't going to do that necessarily, and SaaSifying parts of that aren't necessarily going to solve that problem. I should probably go into that a bit more. It's an ongoing challenge, and then if you compound that with scale, so you don't have one experience, you have 10 or you have thousands in some cases. How do you deal with that?
Yeah,
Governance, those sort of things.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I get, and I think So, and this is part of the reason we're here to talk today. It's about how organizations and traditionally this was the problem of the enterprise, the global corporation that has got multiple markets, multiple brands, multiple categories, is talking to literally hundreds of different demographic, geographical and linguistic audience segments all over the world. But as I guess digital maturity for organizations has spread, and it's now a mid-market objective, and even an SME objective to get that kind of international reach, or to become extremely aligned to their user base. It's now become I'd say quite a widespread challenge for all organizations that are trying to be user-centered, which is to align their digital ecosystem with their customer base, I suppose, and to really create digital experiences that are very closely coupled. I think it would be really good to explore that a bit more, because on the one hand, it seems like there's a kind of a tension between for any business that's trying to achieve this. There's a tension between setting your marketing communications free on the one hand, being creative and innovative in how you talk with your various customer segments, getting to know them better, perhaps iterating your approach on the one hand, and then on the other hand, building in all the things that you really have to, the core governance principles around security and accessibility, cost management, risk management, all those things you just mentioned. So it'd be great to kind of chart out that ecosystem a little bit more. How do modern CMS systems address the need to be tightly governed on the one hand, and then on the other hand, extremely flexible in how they're applied to different audience segments?
Yeah, that's a good, if somewhat large question there. So there's, I think, how about this? If we look at the traditional tension between, say, IT leadership and marketing, really, and there's a gap,
Yeah,
and the larger the gap is there, the more inefficient your business is going to be, and probably the more money you're going to be wasting, And I think you could call that mind the gap, for our UK audiences, if you
Yeah.
like. But I think let's look at the KPIs or the objectives of each of those teams. If you're an IT leader, it's going to be TCO, total cost of ownership. It's going to be OPEX costs, and it's going to be risk. So probably they're the three primaries. On the other side of things, on the marketing side, it's going to be ROI. So we are spending money on primarily creating content and driving people to that content. That's marketing in a nutshell. And ultimately, your goal is conversion. Is convert whatever your idea of conversion is. If you're in a B2C context, that could be as explicit as a product, but it could be fill out a form on a governmental site or something like that, or some engagement through an education type or a university type website. So, but I think you can abstract that problem to basically those two areas, and the tensions or between those, which is historically where we spend a lot of time, and you and I have spent much time talking about that exact problem. I think that's a good baseline to start to explore how do we make that gap between those smaller. So I would suggest in between that, IT, marketing, right, they're very defined. In between, where this is evolved is what we would call that's the digital experience, that's the experience persona. And this has evolved over years and years. So like 15, 20 years ago, that could have been a webmaster, for example, the person that does, which is a very old term. But now that's a
Yeah.
combination of designers, front-end designers. It's a combination of the modern version, a marketing technologist. It's the bridge between these two areas. And this is all about and the ability for that team to be efficient with the technologies and collaborate is really the difference between success and failure. And obviously, you compound that at scale as well. And maybe we'll get into the scale thing as a related topic, because we both work closely in that area. When you have to start dealing with, working with design at scale as well, and multiple brands,
Yeah.
the problem becomes compounded once you start getting into that. But I think that's a good way to start thinking about it, that gap and addressing that experience persona that sits between IT and marketing.
Okay, that's a really good lens to see it through. So let's explore that. Let's explore that gap. So we've talked about the needs of the needs of the I guess the IT community. You talk about total cost of ownership and so on, and then the needs of the marketing community around conversion points. If we're introducing this like digital experience persona, how would we describe the needs of that persona, and how do we measure them, and how do we understand what success looks like?
Well, I think exactly it. Defining it was initially a challenge, because are developers close to IT or are they close to the marketing? And originally, that was very clear. It's a technology thing. That's not so clear anymore. If you're like both of us, well, you still are in the agencies. Like my background before Acquia was agencies as well. That's not such a clear thing to say, particularly with front end design and you know the type of design process, which is largely front end experience development that's evolved over the last, well, best part of 10 years, I guess. It's not so clear to me. A lot of people come from design that are able to produce functional components that are production quality. Are they IT people? No. Are they fully marketing? Not really. Design. So that's really that's that area between. So defining what that is important. And obviously, when we putting together a digital experience, and that's the right way to think about it, rather than as a website as traditionally was the case, because you are creating experience that's typically led through a design process with a marketing goal of conversion. There's going to be aspects of um, brand sort of articulation within that as well. Ultimately, you're building the most engaging experience as you can, coming through content, and be able to make it very easy to bring content. And you need agility in that layer, but you need a great design template that sits in between that. And that on its own is a topic, but I think that's how I see it. And it's not by getting that bit right, what you're enabling, you are enabling that exchange of, well, not exchange so much, a collaboration between the IT which the responses be clear that we've defined here. They need to be repeatable. There needs to be governance around that. It's got to be driven by some kind of predictable, transparent cost. And then the goal of marketers, which is always the same, conversion. And I want ROI. I want transparency into my spend, my content spend. And the cheaper that you can do that and the quicker you can do that, the better. And that's the experience bit in between is the bit that will enable that to happen.
And yeah, I guess we used to talk about them as CMS platforms, didn't we? And we now talk about them as digital experience platforms, customer experience platforms. So we talk about DXP, we talk about CXP. There's lots of phrases out there. We're an industry that delights in acronyms, aren't we? We can't wait to pitch up with another acronym. Um, how have we changed the way that we think about this technology, and how do you see it changing going forwards? Is DXP where we think it should be right now?
In short, no, I don't think it is. I think it's become, we're considered a DXP, and I think our competitors in this space. But my personal view on this is it's become a confusing category. It kind of means everything, and it kind of means nothing at the same time. And I think there's time now to be a much more straightforward about what we're trying to do here. What are the must-haves? That it starts with content, right? That's going to be how you express your brand concepts, how you communicate, and how ultimately what people are interested in finding. Whether that experience is initially, a touch point is through some kind of AI agent, or it's landing on the domain specifically. I think let's look at that problem between IT and marketing again. Really, what it comes down to is quality content. And let me unpack that a bit. I want to be able to get some content in front of the right people at the right time on the right channel for as little cost as possible. And that means a lot of things, like it means bringing data into that. Is my content the right content that is, do I understand how audiences are searching and how they're articulating their problems? Not what we think about it. This is, SEO territory, but more so with AI involved now. How are people articulating the problems they've got, and how do I attach my brand, services, and products to that? Now, I want my platform to tell me how to do that. So when I have an idea or a product I want to express, a service, I want to make sure that's differentiated against my competitors, but it's also I want my platform to feed back to me how to communicate that, what works and what doesn't. And this is really how you're going to be able to measure the effectiveness of that content from an ROI perspective and say, in simple, plain speak, that works for this reason. Do more of that, don't do this. I think that is, if that was the goal of the DXP, which I think it was, but I think it's being overcomplicated by bringing in a bunch of other architectural concepts. But I think the goal is that for whatever, if you have a website, it's really your primary probably point to engage your audience, and those things that needs to be is it needs to be as cheap as possible to be able to create that impactful marketing performance on that, whilst obviously keeping your costs down from on the IT side. But you get the idea, and I think what is the goal, and work back from that. I like this idea of quality content. That's what it is. It's not about more content, because this is now the temptation. I've seen customers try and do this, go off, create loads. We've got Gen AI, create more is better. It's absolutely not better. It is about quality. It's about building trust, carefully curated content that really hits the spot. That is what I think most people are trying to achieve. They may use different terms, but I think that's really the goal of most organizations, is to be able to do that.
I think one of the challenges is that if you're doing that as an organization which is has got multiple brands, for example, and they are, each one of those is operating in a different set of markets, and each one of those markets has got its own language needs, its own cultural needs, its own kind of, I guess, marketing approaches. then you suddenly have this need to, I guess, devolve responsibilities to local marketing teams that have got insight, have got cultural affinity, that working in the same language, helping them to, I guess, like test and learn what works in their specific
Yeah.
context. But at the same time, you're providing a suite of technologies, a suite of governance principles, a suite of design principles, which means you're going to have a consistent brand experience, consistent set of accessibility standards. You're going to be, confident from a security, a scalability point of view. And those two types of tensions, I heard it described once as I think freedom in a box. So you want
Yeah.
to devolve responsibilities, but there are other responsibilities that you absolutely want to reserve to your kind of your group or your central function, and then manage those two kind of tensions to be successful. Getting that right, that's quite a challenge, isn't it?